Hi everybody, welcome to another episode of Jeff's Maintenance Blog. Today we're going to show you how to do an oil change. First things first, you open the hood. Check the oil level. Always check the oil before you drain it to make sure you had some to drain. We're about a half a quart low. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to take off the oil cap. And we're going to put it right here. Prevents us from shutting the hood before we put the oil cap on. Pretty good idea. Now we're going to go downstairs. Okay, so the underside of most vehicles, pretty much the same. If it's a front wheel drive car, you've got the engine, you got the transmission, you got two drive axles. You have the exhaust here. Generally it's very hot. You have a drain plug. Generally helps to know which drain plugs for your oil and which drain plugs for your transmission. Transmission is generally a flatter pan. The plug either faces downwards or it does not have one. The oil drain plug is a deeper pan and the drain plug either faces backwards or forwards. I'm going to start by draining the oil. Before I drain, I let the people upstairs know I'm draining. Clear to drain! Pick the size on the wrench. Release the plug. Clear your drain pan up because I don't want to get oil everywhere. And just unloosen. Now while the oil is draining out, I can inspect the other areas of the vehicle. I can look above me, there's the radiator. I want to make sure there's no coolant coming down, make sure there's no leaks. I'm going to look over here at the transmission, same thing, looking for leaks. Again, be very careful, it is very hot. Go back to the rear of the car and look to make sure there's no problems. Make sure that the exhaust looks like it's intact. Looks like they went over a plastic bag. You can be nice and scrape that off so they don't have a smell. We're going to come back here to the fuel tank. We're looking for a couple of things. Make sure the fuel tank's good, intact, no leaks. And to also check the condition of the fuel filter. Not all vehicles have fuel filters, but the ones that do either have it up here at the back of the tank, the front of the tank, or somewhere on the fuel rail. We're also going to peek at the rear brakes, make sure the calipers aren't leaking, make sure if it's got shocks or struts that they're not leaking, or if there's any brake fluid from lines. The oil stopped draining. Got a few more seconds of that. Once it stops, we'll replace the plug. You want to check the plug. This plug right here has a aluminum washer. It's flattened, which means it's probably been through a couple of oil change. So we're going to remove that. So here's our old drain plug gasket. Pretty well worn out. Took some work to get it off. Brand new drain plug gasket. Should slide on there pretty easy. We're just going to throw that back in. Wipe up any mess you made. Nobody wants drips on their driveway. You're going to take it, because it's aluminum drain plug, or aluminum pan, aluminum gasket, go about a quarter turn past sharp rise and torque. And that covers where you should be at. Crushes the plug or the washer enough that it makes a good seal. Take our tamper seal. I'm going to mark the location of where the plug is in reference to the pan to make sure nobody messes with it between oil changes. Now the filter is generally on the front or the back of the motor. Sometimes it requires us to remove skid plates to gain access. This one's pretty easy. It's also a small filter. If you want to come over here behind me, I'll show you. Grab me a 4612, please. The number is generally on the body of the filter. Before you loosen it, you want to make sure the pan is able to catch the oil, because when you drop it, it's going to let some oil out. Again, be careful. As you loosen the oil, or the oil filter, the temperature of the filter rises because it no longer has oil insulating the metal. So it instantly gets hotter. A lot of guys will use a rag to protect their hand. And pull till the oil filter comes off, be quick about it. Now what I always like to do is I like to look at the mating surface. You get your flashlight. Like to look at the mating surface to make sure there's nothing, no debris on there, no gasket. I always take my rag, clean spot, and wipe the face of the oil filter mount. Make sure it's good. I'll take my new oil filter and the old oil filter. I'll get some oil on my hand and I'll put it on the gasket. Just to prevent the gasket from seizing onto the block and also to make a better seal. Again, spin it on. When it gets to the end, about a quarter turn, and that's snug. You always make sure that after you're done, the filter is the same number and you have a gasket on the filter. It means you didn't leave it somewhere it wasn't supposed to be. So I'm going to get this buttoned up and I'll see you back upstairs. Most vehicles show the viscosity or the weight of the oil on the cap. This vehicle calls for 5W20. The other common oil is 5W30 or 10W30. European cars sometimes call for only a synthetic, which is a 540 or a 040. But for the most part, 520 and 530 covers everything you need. Now this oil change, we're using conventional oil. If you like better oil, we have better oil. We have synthetic and high mileage. My 520 gun measures in the back in quarts. I looked up the specs in this vehicle. It holds 4 quarts. Okay, got 4 quarts in there. Now before I start the vehicle, I'm going to check the oil level. We're in the full range. I'm going to put the cap back on. We're going to do what's called a pressure check. I'm going to have my assistant Alex go downstairs. I'm going to start the vehicle. He's going to make sure nothing's leaking. Alex is going to go downstairs. Starting on bay 1.
Yeah.
Lights out, oil pressure's up. Thank you. Second start. Lights out, oil pressure's up. Thank you, sir. So we did our check starts, everything's fine. Recheck the oil level, it's full. This is where we want it. Now part of the courtesy. We check and top up all the fluids. Alex is going to clean the window and check the tires while we fill up the antifreeze. Here we use a universal antifreeze. Works for about 80% of the cars. There are a couple special vehicles. We have special antifreeze for those. But this one, we just add to the reservoir. The reservoir is a little bit low. We're going to top it up. Generally doesn't need a whole lot unless there's a leak. Next thing I'm going to do is fill up the washer fluid. Once you check the washer fluid, check the brake fluid level and the condition of the fluid. In this case, if you want to look, the fluid on this car actually looks black. it shouldn't look that color. It should be golden. So this vehicle needs a brake service, clean out the fluid, the master cylinder, and flush through all the lines. We also check the power steering. Power steering fluid, similar condition. Looks like this vehicle is due for a mileage interval service, which you do every 30, 60, 90, 120, 150,000 miles. Transmission fluid, though it doesn't have its pink color anymore, doesn't necessarily mean it's bad, but you should probably flush your transmission fluid every 30,000 miles out here, more so if you do towing or a lot of idling. I'm going to check the battery. Pop open the caps, you make sure that the battery doesn't have too much corrosion on the positive and negative. We're going to take our tester. We're going to test the battery. We've completed the battery test. We'll print a copy for the customer. This battery's in good condition. There's a little bit of acid on the outside. You might want to recommend a battery cleaning service, just so too much buildup doesn't go across the top of the battery and short out between the terminals. Last thing to check on our maintenance, we want to check the condition of the air filter. Most cars' air filter is pretty easy to get to. It's on top of the engine. There's always a rubber tube going to the intake manifold.